We are attached. We are human beings. We are attached to people, places, things, ideas, memories. You know how that goes. And it's part of the human condition. And being attached is part of how we stay alive, and especially when you think about it as a species and being together as a tribe. And we have tribal ways and we become attached to those. We have people that matter more, we become attached to those. We have ways of being or thinking and we become very attached to those. Think about beliefs and whoo, how attached we get to those and how they literally can run our lives. So I want to talk about attachments in a sense today, in being attached in a way that's holding me back. Now, the way I want to talk about this is if I'm attached to something and I'm not sure what it is, but I'm feeling resistance or being held back in some way, I might literally just start cutting in my field. Now, the video from last week, we talked about cutting cords, and we went through QEI etiquette and hygiene and how we work to cut cords and things that are attached to us that we don't want attached. So when I'm working with an attachment and I don't know exactly what it is, I literally just start chopping through my field and say I release any attachment that no longer serves me. Now that's a very general way to work with that. A more specific way is what I've been doing this last week, and as most of you know, my husband's in hospice right now. And he's at the end stages of life, and we expected him to be in hospice about 5 days, and he's now been in hospice for 5 weeks. So we are exploring the attachments that we still have that is keeping him alive on the planet when really all of his physical systems could totally be shut down by now. He is still very much alive with his brain working. So Jim and I are using this opportunity to cut any attachments that we have to each other, as we discussed last week in the cords. And when we already cut all of those attachments, we said, well, what are we attached to in our lives that is enough to make him want to stay alive in a body that is paralyzed when there's very little quality of life associated with it. So we started working together. I sat on the bed with him and where we shared our auric fields, and we just started chopping, like I was talking about, to any attachments that we thought were still between us. And that can mean, remember, that can mean children. We have children between us. We have grandchildren between us. We have friends between us. We have music that we love between us. We have memories between us. You see how this can go on, and we have belief systems between us about what do we believe about raising a family? What do we believe about a faith tradition? Can you see that there's no end to the attachments that we have? So there's a distinction here between attachment and detachment and non-attachment. Because you know the Buddha would talk about not being attached, and sometimes, and of course being attached is part of the human condition. Detaching is also part of the human condition because sometimes it's time to detach from certain things. There's also this discernment with non-attachment where we can have things in our lives and we can choose to not be attached to them in an unhealthy way. And that means we might not be attached to the outcome of something. We might not be attached to how someone else acts because it does happen to be their life. We might not be attached to the fact that somebody just made a mistake and delivered me the wrong groceries. Can you even see down to very simple things like that? From the small things to the large, we can choose to be non-attached. Therefore, having a freedom in our experience, because we don't let that thing, if we were attached to it, we don't let it bother us or get to us. So having made that distinction, Jim and I were definitely detaching from things that were attached to us. And we decided, what did we need to be non-attached about? And Jim said, very openly and very surprised, I think I have not totally detached from my body yet. I don't think I realize that I'm actually going to be leaving my body. So I'm going to cut the attachment that I have to my body. And I thought that was really beautiful. Now it sounds obvious that you thought if you were near death or you were dying that you would give up your body, but some part of him was still attached to his body. And I really honored that he had that awareness. The next day so we continued this process. The next day I had the awareness that I had to detach from this idea that I wanted my husband to not be a prisoner in his body. My hope was that Jim could be freed from his body because his mind is working. He's ready to cross over. He's ready to bring this incarnation to a close, and he has not yet crossed over. And it's almost become frustrating, and especially for me because I want him to be free. It's not about me or if he gets to still be here for me. It's about him being free. And I cut that attachment, that it mattered what I thought if he was a prisoner in his body or not. And even as loving as it sounded, I wanted my husband to be free, it's still an attachment. It's a belief. I now am in a state of non-attachment about when Jim chooses to go. And I have now released myself from the angst that this thought that my husband had to be a prisoner in his body. I don't get to be attached to that anymore. I am in a complete state of non-attachment. So I invite you to take a look at your life. What attachments can you cut, and what awareness does that bring up for you? It's been a beautiful lesson. I could give you 5 or 6 more examples, except we're done here. And I want you to come up with your own examples and how that sets you free, because it is a feeling of freedom when we have detached from something that no longer serves us and we choose to live in a space of non-attachment. I'm Connie Keene with Quantum Energy Infusion, where everything is energy.